Get ready, because what you will discover here is not what you were told in the pulpits or in the prayer groups. There is a truth that many avoid, or even dare to consider: demons do not always come near to destroy. Sometimes, they come to help. But calm down. This help is not what it seems. In fact, it is one of the most sophisticated spiritual traps in the unseen world. And God's chosen ones are the main targets of this dark strategy. Sound controversial? But that's exactly why almost no one talks about it. Imagine spending your entire life fighting against evil, not realizing that it may be disguised as friendly advice, professional opportunity, or even prophetic words. The spiritual conspiracy is real, and the war doesn't just happen outside, it's inside, in the thoughts, in the emotions, in the decisions. In this content, you will understand why demons approach the chosen, how they act, and, most importantly, how to protect themselves. If you've ever felt that something strange is hanging around you, even though you're doing everything right, maybe you're in the middle of one of these invisible battles. And this, my friend, is a sign that you are more important in the spiritual realm than you realize. So it stays until the end, because the truth that is about to be revealed, it can change everything. There are things that happen to God's chosen ones that no one can explain, and they try. A release from traffic, a cure without explanation, a word that arrives at the right time. It all seems like a coincidence, but those who have spiritual discernment know that this is not the work of chance. They are signs of the enemy being thwarted even before they manifest themselves. It is divine protection acting silently but powerfully while the world around barely notices what is happening. Many of these events manifest as synchronicities, unexpected encounters, dreams that are fulfilled, inner warnings. Sometimes the chosen one is one step away from opening dangerous spiritual doors, but something holds him back. It could be a weird feeling, an inconvenient delay, or even a message that appears on social media right at that moment. All of this is part of the invisible spiritual warfare that surrounds you. And believe me, what seems like delay is often deliverance. Even in the midst of chaos, there is a supernatural order governing the journey of the chosen. They go through spiritual trials that would make any other fall apart, but they stand tall. There is a force that guides them, even when all seems lost. This is where unshakable faith comes in, the one that is not built on good days, but on storms. And the curious thing is that, many times, this silent force also attracts unexpected allies, including some who come from the dark side. It may seem strange, even counterintuitive, but there are times when demons themselves offer help to God's chosen ones. And no, that's not because they suddenly became nice. There is a larger spiritual conspiracy, where even the agents of darkness recognize the power that exists in those who carry a genuine spiritual calling. Sometimes it's out of interest, like a pawn trying to outwit the king in chess. Other times, it is pure fear of divine immunity that protects these warriors. It is in this dynamic that a great deception resides, help disguised as evil. The enemy knows that he cannot always attack head-on, so he approaches offering quick solutions, shortcuts, promises. The spirit of deception is cunning and acts when the chosen one is vulnerable or tired of spiritual trial. Demonic influence doesn't come with horns and smoke, it masquerades as opportunity, advice, even friendship. Therefore, spiritual discernment must always be sharp as a sword. Curiously, there are demons who, by strategy or even by a strange desire for redemption, divert their destructive route and start helping. Yes, there are ancient and contemporary reports about this. But make no mistake, help without divine direction can be spiritual sabotage. The chosen one needs to understand that every spiritual alliance has a price. So, before accepting any help, even that which seems heavenly, one must ask, does it bring me closer or take me away from the divine purpose? And that answer usually doesn't come out loud, she whispers. There is a shield that you can't see, but you feel. God's chosen ones carry a divine protection that acts as a spiritual force field. It is not an exaggeration, accidents avoided, traps undone, spiritual attacks that fail without explanation. All of this points to a supernatural covering. Even if all hell conspires against it, this invisible power repels the evil presence with a silent but unbeatable authority. It's like walking through a minefield and coming out unscathed. This spiritual authority is not bought, nor is it conquered by human merit. It is granted, activated by spiritual calling, and sustained by unwavering faith. When the chosen one is in position, even the shadows recede. And that bothers me a lot. Demonic manipulation unsuccessfully attempts to invade territories protected by this anointing. Therefore, many notice that when praying, fasting, or simply declaring the word, something changes in the environment. It is the power from on high manifesting. But beware, this power does not eliminate the battle. It guarantees victory, yes, but not exemption from war. The enemy tries to use spirit sabotage as a last card. He can't play, so he tries to weaken him. Signs of the enemy come in subtle forms: a sudden discouragement, a constant distraction, an emotional slump for no reason. The spiritual warfare continues, even with protection. And believe me, it is precisely this light that begins to attract others, who are in darkness and need direction. God's chosen ones do not shine only by themselves, they are beacons in the midst of the storm for those who are lost. Have you noticed how certain people have a presence that soothes, that inspires? It is not charisma, it is called spiritual. In heavy environments, their mere arrival changes the atmosphere. That light doesn't come from self-help or motivational techniques, but from unwavering faith that carries a higher purpose. Those who have spiritual eyes immediately realize, there is someone guided by something higher. This light serves as a compass for those who live under constant spiritual attack, not knowing where the blows come from. Many find peace just by being close to a chosen one. It is a silent influence, which fights the evil presence without even having to speak. And even those who don't understand, feel it. A practical example. People who change their lives just by observing how a chosen one deals with spiritual trials without losing their sanity. This posture is a living class of resistance and hope. But being light also attracts looks, not all of them friendly. Some approach wanting to warm up, others to try to extinguish the shine. This is where the need for spiritual discernment comes in, to understand who comes for healing and who arrives with camouflaged demonic influence. Spiritual warfare sometimes begins with a compliment, a hug. And it is at this point that the chosen one begins to realize that this mission is not just to guide, it is to protect those who follow him from what the eye does not see. One of the greatest riches of God's chosen ones is the direct connection with the divine. They don't need intermediaries to hear the right spiritual direction, they carry an inner voice that serves as a compass, even in the worst storms. It is a whisper that guides when no one else understands, a peace that appears when everything screams otherwise. This spiritual discernment is not divination, it is attunement. And the more the chosen one listens and obeys, the clearer that voice becomes. This connection is vital, especially when it comes to spiritual doors. Not every open door is a blessing, just as not every closing is a loss. A practical example. That job that seemed perfect, but something told me not to take it, and then it turns out that it was a trap. Or that old friendship that begins to weigh down, for no apparent reason, later revealing itself to be a channel of demonic manipulation. The spirit of deception loves to camouflage itself in opportunities. Therefore, listening to the divine voice is a matter of spiritual survival. The gift of discernment is like a radar, it detects intention behind the smile, mood behind the silence, and evil presence disguised as supposed goodness. It's not paranoia, it's divine protection. The chosen one does not see everything, but feels enough to make decisions aligned with the sky. And this sensitivity becomes so sharp that it begins to bother those who live in deception. After all, those who walk in the light expose everything that lives in the shadows. And the shadows start to get agitated. Being one of God's chosen ones isn't a pretty title to put in your Instagram bio, it's a call to war. Literally. These men and women carry within them an unshakable faith that does not bend in the face of the storm, nor does it shrink when the ground disappears. They were forged in pain, in silence, in spiritual trial that others would barely endure. And that doesn't make them superior, but more prepared for the battles that the natural world doesn't see. This war is not with swords, but with choices. Every attitude, every word, every thought can be a field of spiritual attack or resistance. Spiritual warriors face spiritual sabotage disguised as routine, inexplicable sleep at prayer time, emotional fatigue at decisive moments, even silly distractions that distract from major revelations. But those who understand the purpose already know that these are all signs of the enemy trying to destabilize. And because he knows, he resists with strategy. These warriors are not recognized by armor, but by firmness. When everything around them falls apart, they remain. And not because they are made of iron, but because they know where their source is. They feed on the word, strengthen themselves in secret, and keep divine immunity high. Want a practical example? Swap an hour of social media for reading Proverbs, or fast on Mondays with a focus on spiritual clarity. Simple. Yes. But powerful, as every true soldier knows. The mission of God's chosen one is not comfortable, it is demanding, intense, and often lonely. The spiritual call comes loaded with responsibilities that are not always understood by those around them. While some ask for clear signs, the chosen one needs to walk in the dark trusting only the inner voice. The spiritual trial is constant, as if the universe tests your faith every day. But this pain has a purpose, to mold the spirit so that it can withstand the glory that is to come. What few understand is that demonic persecution is not a sign of weakness, but a confirmation of the spiritual worth of the chosen one. The more light, the more shadow tries to get closer. The greater the impact, the greater the attempted spirit attack. It is like being a lighthouse on a stormy night, the ships seek it, but the thunder also hits it harder. The evil presence is bothered by those who are aligned with the sky. And then the real spiritual war begins. The chosen one cannot run away from his mission, even if he tries. The spiritual doors that open to him do not close easily. He may even deviate for a while, but the call pulls, the purpose screams, and the spiritual conspiracies only reinforce how much he needs to stand firm. It is not about religiosity, but about destiny. And on this journey, he soon realizes that even the demons are watching him, not with contempt, but with caution. Not every demon acts with screams, possessions, or scenes from a horror movie. Some are subtle, clever, and even seem harmless. The personality of evil entities varies. There are those whose intention is not to destroy directly, but to corrupt little by little, as someone who drips poison drop by drop. And the most intriguing? Some show a desire for redemption. Not out of kindness, but out of spiritual strategy. They know that God's chosen ones have a power that can influence even darkness. These beings are not dumb, far from it. They study, observe, analyze patterns. They approach each other as counselors, as help disguised as evil, often using biblical language, beautiful quotes, and even apparent empathy. And therein lies the danger. The spirit of deception does not present itself as such. It acts between the lines, conquers through logic, and infiltrates the mind before settling in the soul. For this reason, spiritual discernment is more valuable than any gift. Sometimes, the approach of these demons is purely strategic. They don't want to destroy, they want to infiltrate. They want to be close to the chosen one to influence key decisions, weaken relationships, or even manipulate emotions. Have you ever seen that friendship that begins to change your behavior subtly? Or that person who always shows up when you're about to take an important step in faith? Well, it's not always a coincidence. And spiritual sensitivity begins to light the alert. Demonic manipulation rarely enters through the front door. She prefers open windows, emotional breaches, fragile relationships. It's like an infiltration in a house. You don't realize it at first, but when you see it, it's already running down the walls. Close people can be used as unconscious channels of evil influence, not out of malice, but out of lack of spiritual vigilance. Sometimes that honest opinion you heard was just an arrow thrown to weaken your faith. The deceitful appearance of goodness is the dark's most effective weapon. Not all help comes from God, and not all praise is a blessing. There are people who, with a smile on their faces, plant doubt in the hearts of God's chosen ones. A practical example. That friend who always comes up with advice that takes you away from your mission, saying things like, "Take it easy, you don't need to exaggerate your faith." It seems careful, but it is spiritual sabotage. The spirit of deception loves to disguise itself as common sense. This kind of influence is not scandalous, it is subtle, persistent, and therefore dangerous. The chosen one needs to keep his spiritual doors tightly locked and watch the signs of the enemy carefully. Sometimes, an out-of-turn comment, a seemingly innocent conversation, are already indications of spiritual warfare in progress. And the most challenging? React wisely and not with anger. Because the enemy feeds on confusion, and what he fears most is clarity. God's chosen ones have a spiritual sensitivity that goes beyond the ordinary. They feel the atmosphere of an environment even before they enter. They sense hidden intentions, even when the faces are friendly. This perception is not superstition, it is a gift. An internal antenna that detects demonic manipulation, evil presence, or even evil help in disguise. And with this gift comes a great responsibility, not to be deceived by what is cute to the eye, but dangerous to the spirit. This sensitivity requires that the chosen one live with mindfulness. It is not living distrusting everything, but being wise in everything. When something seems too good, he questions. When someone insists too much, he prays. And when he feels the atmosphere heavy in a conversation, he retreats. An example. An incredible work proposal, but one that takes away devotional time and disconnects from the mission, it can be a trap. Spiritual discernment reveals what the eye does not see. But acting sensitively also requires firmness. You can't give in out of pity, attachment, or fear of hurting. The chosen one needs to learn to say no with love and clarity. It needs to stay away from toxic environments, even if they are full of good people. Because a spiritual war is won with positioning, not diplomacy. And it is in this steadfastness that the enemy realizes that he is dealing with someone who sees beyond. It's curious, but demons have a certain obsession with God's chosen ones. They can't face them directly, so they try to infiltrate, like viruses that can't break through the wall, but take advantage of the cracks. They study the behavior of the chosen one, their emotional weaknesses, their routines. The attempt at manipulation is constant, subtle, calculated, silent. And it all starts when the chosen one lets his guard down, even if for a second. They know they can't win head-on, so they use the gaps. A comment that shakes self-esteem, a situation that stimulates silent sin, a weariness that prevents prayer. It is all part of a plan, to weaken faith, to confuse spiritual discernment, to misalign the vision of the spiritual calling. And if this happens, the chosen one temporarily loses the divine immunity that protects him. Therefore, even emotional fatigue can be a sign of the enemy. And the most dangerous? Often this approach is loaded with good intentions. It is help disguised as evil, disguised as advice, support, or empathy. Have you ever seen when someone says, "God understands," to justify wrong behavior? Well, the spirit of deception loves to use Christian phrases to justify deviations. And the chosen one needs to be so aligned with the sky that he recognizes, on the spot, when something comes from the darkness dressed as light. There is a war going on right now, as you read these words. And the scariest thing? It doesn't make noise. It is a silent spiritual battle, fought within the mind, the heart, in the simplest decisions of everyday life. God's chosen ones live on this battlefield all the time. A thought can be an arrow, an emotion can be a distraction, and even a compliment can hide spiritual sabotage. The enemy works on subtlety. Everyday interactions are minefields. A poorly conducted conversation, a video watched without a filter, a choice of words that seems innocent, everything can be used as a spiritual attack strategy. The evil presence does not need rituals, it infiltrates routine, haste, discouragement. Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, a sequence of small events tries to disconnect you from faith? It is spiritual conspiracy at work, trying to divert you from the purpose. But those who have spiritual discernment perceive these patterns and act. The chosen one learns to react in the invisible, praying when no one sees, being silent when everyone screams, resisting even when he is tired. This war has no audience, but defines destinies. And every victory in this silent field is a test of the chosen ones, a sign that even if the shadows are around, the light remains steady. And it is this light that begins to reveal those around you who are fighting or collaborating with the darkness. Not every spiritual attack comes with screams and possessions. Sometimes it comes up with a joke, a disguised criticism, or well-meaning advice. Many of God's chosen ones live daily with people who are unknowingly being instruments of demonic influence. They are friends, family, colleagues, people close to them, but spiritually disconnected. And because they don't realize it, they end up opening spiritual doors that affect the surrounding environment. The demonic manipulation, in this case, is subtle, but devastating. What begins as small attitudes, constant murmuring, negativity, comparison, becomes spiritual sabotage. Not because these people are evil, but because they are vulnerable to the evil presence that takes advantage of their emotions. And the chosen one feels it. The environment weighs down, the energy changes, the mind begins to confuse. Have you ever left a conversation exhausted, not knowing why? Often, it is spiritual warfare waged in silence. Therefore, spiritual discernment needs to be activated full-time. Not to judge, but to protect. Not to isolate himself, but to know how to position himself. A practical example. Start noticing how you feel after each interaction. If someone always leaves you unmotivated, confused, or distant from your faith, it's time to review that connection. The enemy's signals sometimes have a sweet voice, but their effects are corrosive. And the chosen one needs to learn to listen with the spirit, not just with the ears. Living with those who carry demonic influence, even if unconsciously, requires wisdom, compassion, and strategy. God's chosen one cannot simply go around cutting ties for nothing, but neither can he pretend that everything is fine. The key is in spiritual discernment, knowing when to approach, when to move away, and when to just pray. It is love with limits, presence with purpose. Because to maintain contact without spiritual protection is to open dangerous doors to invisible attacks. Compassion is essential, but it cannot become a prison link. The chosen one needs to learn to love without contaminating himself. This means establishing emotional distance when necessary, without guilt. For example, you can continue to treat that negative friend well, but you don't have to open your heart to them all the time. Not every toxic person needs to be excluded. Sometimes, they just need to be repositioned in their life. Love without toxic involvement is the secret here. Practical action begins in the spirit, constant prayer for discernment and specific fasting for deliverance from the environment. Then, it goes for the natural: avoid conversations that always pull you down, refuse invitations that deviate from the purpose, and even change the subject when you notice demonic manipulation camouflaged in concern. The chosen one does not isolate himself, but he does not mix either. And this posture, in itself, already begins to reveal who is really next to it, and who is just taking advantage of the light. Not every outstretched hand is help. Sometimes, it's a trap. God's chosen ones need to have spiritual eyes to see beyond what is offered. Help disguised as evil usually comes in moments of greatest fragility: generous advice when one is lost, an irrefutable proposal when one is tired. Demonic manipulation hides in good intentions, perfect timing, sweet words. And if spiritual discernment is asleep, the chosen one falls. The most challenging thing is that these offers do not come with obvious signs. They come with promises of ease, excessive compliments, or even that feeling of, "This is too good to be true." And usually, it really is. An example: a professional partnership that offers a lot, but requires renunciation of values. Or someone who approaches with empathy, but gradually diverts the focus from the spiritual mission. It's subtle. It's dangerous. It is spiritual warfare in the form of kindness. To protect himself, the chosen one needs to ask questions that go beyond the obvious. Does this help strengthen my purpose or take me away from it? What do I need to sacrifice to accept this? Does this movement bring me closer to God, or does it just solve a momentary problem? Divine immunity is activated when unshakable faith is united with wisdom. Because accepting any help without examining its source is like opening the spiritual doors and inviting the enemy to sit at the table. The spiritual trials that God's chosen ones face are not punishment, they are preparation. It sounds harsh to say, but the truth is that every difficulty has a refining purpose. Like gold and fire, the spirit of the chosen one is purified in struggles. When everything seems to be falling apart, it is there that character is being molded, faith strengthened, and spiritual discernment calibrated. It is the test of the chosen, the necessary process before promotion. This evidence comes in many forms: emotional crises, financial scarcity, abandonment, slander. They are spiritual attacks disguised as natural problems. But those who understand the divine plan begin to see each pain as training. A practical example: when you pray and nothing changes, but your posture changes. When you lose something, but you gain clarity. Each fall becomes a chance to rise stronger, wiser, and more armored against demonic manipulation. The divine mission requires resistance, and this resistance is not born in ease. It is built in the knows, in the deserts, in the silences of God. The enemy knows this, so he tries to interrupt the process with distractions, shortcuts, and even help disguised as evil. But those who endure trials become unshaken, and this spiritual strength is what troubles the darkness the most. Because the more polished, the more light the chosen one carries. And that light begins to attract others. God's chosen ones do not live only for themselves. Their spiritual victories serve as an inspiration to those who are still in the midst of darkness. Each trial overcome, each spiritual attack overcome, each spiritual door closed at the right time, is transformed into a testimony. And testimony, unlike speech, has weight. Because it's real. It is lived. And those who observe from the outside feel that there is something different there, something that words do not explain, but that the Spirit recognizes. The life of the chosen one is like an open letter, read by everyone around. People in silence, watching how he reacts to injustice, how he deals with loss, how he remains firm even when everything invites him to give up. This fidelity, even without fanfare, is a strong sign in the spiritual world. The unwavering faith of these spiritual warriors becomes a beacon for those who are adrift. An example: the mother who prays daily for her children and, even without seeing change, continues to believe. This teaches more than 1,000 sermons. And the most powerful thing is that the chosen one does not need to force anything. His very presence carries spiritual authority. He walks into an environment and the energies align, the conversations change tone, the spiritual atmosphere responds. This is not arrogance, it is responsibility. Because to be an example is also to be a target. And those who become guides need to remain more alert than ever. After all, the greater the light, the greater the shadow that tries to approach. There is a type of shield that the world does not understand, but hell respects: the spiritual immunity of God's chosen ones. It's not that they aren't attacked, they are, and a lot. But evil cannot touch them deeply. They try to knock it down, but they can't destroy it. They try to confuse, but they cannot erase the vision. It is as if there were an invisible shield enveloping mind, soul, and body, activated by unshakable faith and maintained by obedience to the spiritual call. This divine protection does not eliminate war, but guarantees victory. Have you ever seen people who go through impossible situations and remain firm, smiling, helping others? It's not human strength, it's divine immunity. It is the reflection of those who have learned to close spiritual doors, resist demonic manipulation, and walk even when the signs of the enemy scream to stop. The secret? Intimacy with God, constant vigilance, and a heart that does not negotiate with evil. What's more, this immunity is not only defense, it is also offensive. The chosen one not only resists, he advances. He goes where others are afraid, enters where the evil presence reigns and transforms the environment. He doesn't just survive spiritual warfare, he confronts it. Because he knows he was called to do so. And with each victory, its light bothers more, and becomes a real threat to the kingdom of darkness. The light that indwells God's chosen ones is not poetic, it is lethal to darkness. It doesn't just illuminate, it burns. Where there is true light, the evil presence cannot stand. Therefore, the chosen ones are annoying. They enter environments and cause spiritual discomfort in those who are living under demonic influence. And the most curious? Often, they don't even realize it. They only notice that people start to move away, situations become strange, and attacks come out of nowhere. But it's not chance, it's reaction. This light is not the result of human effort, but of fidelity to the divine mission. The more the chosen one aligns with their spiritual calling, the brighter they shine, and the more they become a direct threat to the shadow realm. He doesn't need to preach to make an impact, his life already denounces. That is why the signs of the enemy intensify around you. They try to silence, distract, discredit. Because you know, if this light continues to grow, it will expose things that were well hidden. Fidelity to the light is your greatest weapon. When the chosen one decides to stand firm, even without applause, even in the midst of spiritual trial, he activates a force that no demonic manipulation can contain. And that's when the demons, once arrogant, start to act cautiously. Because the spiritual war is fierce, and whoever carries this light, he didn't come to play. He came to win. And this victory, it will still reveal truths that the world is not ready to hear. Now tell me, after all this, can you still ignore the signs? Do you really believe that all these trials, coincidences, and interferences are just the result of chance? Or are you in the midst of a spiritual war far more serious than you imagined? The truth is that God's chosen ones live a reality that few have the courage to face, and even fewer are prepared to resist. So I ask you, how many times have you accepted a help without discerning its origin? How many spiritual doors have you opened thinking you were just being polite, or kind? What if the enemy is already sitting at your table, disguised as an ally? It is not enough to know, it is necessary to act. And act wisely, with firmness, with unshakable faith. You'll keep ignoring the invisible world. Or will you start to really take a stand? If this all moved you, then don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell. Because this is just the beginning. There's a lot more to tell you about spiritual warfare, demonic manipulation, and how God's chosen ones can, and should, shield themselves. Don't get distracted. You were called to something bigger.